This is Ben Hartley with Med Farms, and I'm on the line with Mark Petitions. Mark is an author, speaker, and cannabis activist who has written an interesting initiative that we're going to be discussing today. So, Mark, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. Yes, my name is Mark Perdersen, and my organization is ECF Therapy Center. ECF Therapy Center, we have an office in Peoria, Illinois, and we also base out of Colorado Springs. We are an educational organization. Our purpose is to help patients to be able to to medicate with cannabis. We also help patients with dosing as well. Other organizations I founded is Cannabis Patient Network, which I actually founded while in Missouri and working there. And again, my purpose there was to give cannabis patients a voice. I've conducted well over 200 interviews on camera with scientists, doctors, politicians, mayors, city councilmen, governor, and such, but mostly with patients, and patients from a wide variety of different illnesses and from all over the country. And I spent most of the last 10 years traveling all over the country doing interviews with patients. So I've also I've rewritten the House Bill, Cannabis House Bill, Medical Cannabis House Bill for the state of Missouri twice. And I'm on my second full legalization bill, which is the Missouri Cannabis Restoration and Protection Act, which we're currently gathering signatures across the state.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely want to hear more about the initiatives. And why don't you tell me what brought you to be a cannabis activist, and how long have you been involved in this movement?
Actually, I've been a cannabis patient now for over 18 years. I used cannabis recreationally in high school and college, but I quit for 18 years. I just really didn't feel I had a need for it. But then I became chronically ill, and basically I grew up and then later lived in Herculaneum, Missouri, which is a very polluted little town. It's the principal industry there is lead smelting. And so I've been contaminated and recontaminated over the course of a number of years growing up. And then I purchased a house there and moved back. And it was during the course of remodeling this house, I opened up the walls and pulled up carpet and exposed myself and my family to 100 years worth of lead, cadmium, and arsenic, the byproducts, carcinogens, the lead smelting process. And that's really what made me ill. I became an activist because of the fact that after being on all kinds of medications, drugs, prescription drugs, over the course of a number of years and having nothing but detrimental effect from that, I finally found a little blip on a fibromyalgia news group. I had fibromyalgia pain, neuropathy in my hands and feet. I had migraines, severe migraines, to the point I was seeing a migraine specialist. I was taking experimental drugs for migraines. I was experiencing seizures. I had issues with my short and long-term memory. I was also hospitalized several times because of all the drugs that they were giving me. It just really tore up my stomach. So I started using cannabis back in '97. And it was remarkable the difference it made for me, and taking away the pain and helping me with a lot of these issues that I was dealing with. Restoring my memory was a huge factor for me. But taking away the migraines and seizures, it was absolutely amazing, the difference it made in my life. But the big problem there is that, of course, cannabis was still illegal. In my possession and use, I was still a felon. And, so that's really what pushed me into becoming an activist for myself, but also for those, as I started realizing that I wasn't alone. There were so many other people stretched out across the country who had found out the same thing, that cannabis could help them, but not only with chronic issues like what I was dealing with, but with terminal issues as well. Dealing with life-threatening issues like different forms of cancers and then other illnesses like multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's and Lou Gehrig's disease and so many others. It was just became quite evident that we as a people had to stand up, and we had to make a stand, and the rest of the world needed to know that cannabis was in fact non-toxic, and that cannabis could be a very, very important treatment for so many different illnesses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's quite an experience, and I suspect there are millions of Americans and citizens of the world who have a similar experience, who have benefited from the effects of cannabis for various ailments. And sadly, like you've already mentioned, there's so many people who are dying as a result of prohibition. So tell me a little bit about your initiative here in Missouri. You said you're collecting petitions. Tell me some of the key points about that.
Well, perhaps the most important thing about this bill, and it's based on the very premise, and this is not just a premise, this is a fact, is that cannabis is non-toxic. Cannabis has been food for the human race for over 25,000 years. It's been essential. Cannabis is highly nutritious, more nutritious than flax, more digestible than flax. It's vitally important to us from the point of nutrition.
Are we talking about
No, go ahead.
Industrial hemp, or are we talking about marijuana? Because in some people's minds, the two are different.
Well, see, that's an excellent point, sir, because the fact is that they're not. Now, if we're talking cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, or cannabis ruderalis, cannabis ruderalis perhaps the one that's more often than not is associated with industrial hemp. These are all the same product, and in fact are regularly interbred in the here in Colorado and other states where cannabis is being sold. It's regularly reintroduced into medical strains, into other strains, to shorten growth cycles for other different reasons, for the same reason that cannabis has been cultivated all along, all throughout the 25,000 plus years. It's been cultivated for different purposes. But understand that just within the last 100 years have we started separating and calling marijuana and calling hemp something else. It used to all be hemp. It used to all be called hemp. The percentages of THC found within cannabis is not the marker. It's not the marker that should determine whether or not cannabis is used for industrial purposes or not. It's really what we are trying to derive from the cannabis is really what it's about, really not the cannabinoids. The cannabinoids found within cannabis, the phytocannabinoids, their purpose is for the health and the processes of the cannabis plant itself. For the same reason we have within ourselves what is called an endocannabinoid system. Again, right. We have a system where we actually produce substances that are very similar to the cannabinoids found within the cannabis plant. This is why cannabis interacts with us in the way in which it does. We have an endocannabinoid system. Actually, all mammals and even some invertebrates have an endocannabinoid system. So what does all that mean? Well, our endocannabinoid system is our most important endocrine system. This is where we have the production of hormones and the chemicals that regulate the different functions within our body. In other words, maintaining balance or homeostasis. And this is what our endocannabinoid system is all about. And that's why whenever we supplement with phytocannabinoids from the cannabis plant, we take these in our body. It assists us with things like apoptosis, or the eradication of cancerous cells, or the stopping of seizures, or the other many different things that cannabis can actually do for our system, for our bodies, is actually done because it's functioning as a supplement. I'm sorry, I'm kind of dancing around a little bit. No. I'm sorry, you asked me specifically about the initiative?
Yeah, great information. With the MCPRA, it would classify cannabis as a medical plant or a drug, or how does the initiative classify cannabis? It removes it from the classifications of hemp and marijuana, which is what we see throughout the country. So explain to me the difference.
Okay, currently throughout the nation, cannabis is listed as a Schedule I drug. The Controlled Substance Act, which came into being and it was 1970, 71, right around that realm, Richard Nixon, who was our president at the time, insisted on putting cannabis as a Schedule I drug at that time because of the strict penalties and such that were going to be around that particular designation. He didn't do it because of any harmful effects because of the use of cannabis. He did it specifically for only one reason, and that was because people who were protesting the Vietnam War, he saw them as all being hippies. He saw hippies as all being pot smokers, and he thought this would give me a good opportunity to be able to put them behind bars. That is all documented and is factual. And in fact, that is exactly what happened. He was able to arrest a lot of people who protested the Vietnam War because of that particular action. But the cannabis remained as a Schedule I drug through the years and actually became entrenched there. It really is not even truly a Schedule I drug. It's actually kind of like in limbo right now. It was put there temporarily just so that they could, supposedly at the time they stated, they were going to do some testing to determine whether or not it really even needed to be on the list at all. So that's what they were supposed to do. Well, the testing didn't happen. What did happen is in the latter part of the 1970s, we do have the Compassionate Investigation of a New Drug program, which was perhaps our very first IND program. This is a means in which to test Schedule I drugs.
Schedule I states that marijuana has no known medicinal value, correct?
That's exactly correct. Schedule I drugs are normally such. They are either chemicals that are highly toxic. There are chemicals that have been used to try to experiment to create other drugs, but found to have detrimental effect. Case in point is heroin. Heroin was created in 1884, marketed in 1887 by Bayer Corporation, and it was originally considered a miracle drug, but later found, of course, to be what it is, such a highly addictive drug with really no real purpose. Drug companies chose rather to take and give it a different name and call it Oxycontin, that they can market that. But anyway, as far as cannabis is concerned, it remained a Schedule I drug. In other words, having no medicinal value whatsoever in their mind, even though since 1974 our own federal government has known that cannabis could in fact kill cancer. It has remained there because it has been a very comfortable thing for law enforcement, particularly regarding asset forfeiture, to be able to arrest people at will. So basically, the very first line of the Missouri Cannabis Restoration and Protection Act removes cannabis entirely from that list. There has been some talk that the federal government might ratchet it down to a Schedule II, to a Schedule III, and on down. I believe that would be a terrible mistake. Schedule I is the realm of doctors with only Schedule I licenses and access to Schedule I pharmacies. Schedule II through V is the realm of the pharmacists and the drug companies. Moving it to Schedule II or 5 through 5 basically means they are handing cannabis over to the pharmaceutical industry to take and treat however they so choose. Yeah, removing cannabis from the drug schedule. What this really represents is that right now cannabis being listed as a Schedule I drug means that it can be that it's only for very specialized experimentation. This is why we're seeing these CBD programs popping up across the country. These are actually mini IND programs or investigational new drug programs. And you'll notice that these programs are popping up in states, and they are associated with university hospitals that do medical research. And these are where classically Schedule I drugs are tested. And so that's why these CBD programs are popping up the way they are. What we have in states like here in Colorado, where cannabis is sort of legal, this is nowhere close to being really legal. This is actually just a different form of prohibition. Being able to have people, not even a physician, not even a pharmacist, handing out Schedule I drugs is in itself totally bizarre. But that's in effect what we have going on here. Of course, we know the reason why is because we know that cannabis is non-toxic. But according to law, even state law, even, here in Colorado, where it's supposed to be the most legal of anywhere in the country, Colorado looks to the federal government for drug scheduling.
Right.
So, in effect, cannabis is a Schedule I drug here in Colorado. And yet, we have dispensaries that hand out cannabis out to the public. So you see it's a complete backwards kind of a scenario. So people often ask, they say, well, why, if cannabis is legal, why do we still have people being arrested? Why do we still have all these issues going on? Why do we have all these concerns? Because we have not dealt with the drug scheduling issue. That's why the very first line of the Missouri Cannabis Restoration Protection Act does exactly that. It removes cannabis entirely from the list of controlled substances, which is where it should be, because cannabis is, in fact, science has proven cannabis is non-toxic, and in fact has a high degree of medicinal value. So by those two factors, it does not belong in a Schedule I spot, not even a Schedule V spot, because even Schedule V is toxic. So cannabis is non-toxic, doesn't belong on the list anywhere at all. By removing cannabis entirely from the list of controlled substances means it can be classified as it should be, and that is as a food. Cannabis has been food for the human race for over 25,000 years. It should be again. Now, the big question here comes down to is that if cannabis, if you can take and shrink tumors, which in fact I have with cannabis, if you stop seizure disorders with cannabis, we have food that can heal us. And now that's most medicine is toxins. Everything, right. every prescription drug is actually poison.
Essentially, what the federal government has done is created prohibition for nearly 100 years. Now, as more and more people are seeing benefits of this plan and more studies are being produced, they see it as a viable market. And they are essentially using the system and the grassroots movement, legalization movement, to take it over, take it from the people where it belongs, and make profit from them like they've done with other drugs.
Well, if you look at the 2001 patent on cannabis process, which is it's a public document, you can access it through the internet. It was taken out in 2001. It was taken out by the federal government. If you look at the assignee for this particular patent, the assignee is the United States government, i.e., Health and Human Services. If you look down in the patent, you can look down at the people who have signed on the patent, noteworthy people like Raphael Mechoulam. Raphael Mechoulam is the one who isolated THC in 1964. He is also the one who's headed up the research into that discovered the endocannabinoid system and has discovered the other endocannabinoids, anandamide, 2-AG, and such, and they're identifying their particular benefits and all. But if you look down at the abstract for this, is 27 pages, but in the abstract, it actually states in there that cannabis is effective in the treatment of stroke and the prevention of stroke. I believe it also mentions Parkinson's disease and may even mention Alzheimer's. I have to look at it again. And it mentions several.
Unbelievable.
If you read on in the patent, it talks about the fact that cannabis is, in fact, non-toxic, and that because of its being non-toxic, it's the perfect adjunct to other pharmaceutical treatments. So that was in 2001. This is 2016.
So our government classifies cannabis as Schedule I with no medicinal value, and yet they own a patent proving that it has medicinal value for certain illnesses. It's unbelievable.
Not only that it's medicinal, but that it is non-toxic, which is so vitally important. When we're talking about, particularly talking about our bill, one of the most important factors is the fact that cannabis is non-toxic. That means it's not going to cause harm for us to make it legal again. Now, in my bill, I mentioned, and there are several different things that have brought up some controversy. One of those things is the fact that I don't have an age limit on the bill. In the bill,
I definitely want to get to that. Let me before we get there, can we just talk about a couple more points I think are really important to highlight. of this initiative.
Absolutely.
And then we can get into controversies and some of the misinformation that's being spread out there.
Okay.
So the initiative gets passed in Missouri, goes to the ballot. Voters have the opportunity to legalize cannabis. What does that mean? Who gets to grow it? Who gets to use it? Who gets to sell it? Let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay. What this really means, in the most simplistic fashion, is the best way to describe this. My bill has like 12 points. I brought it down. It was quite painful over the course of quite a period of time. I evaluated and reevaluated these particular points and how they would be addressed in a truthful fashion for the citizens of Missouri. What this actually means is that cannabis would be the same as any agricultural crop. So you could take and put lettuce, or as High Times magazine called my bill, the tomato bill, let's put tomatoes in there. So it would be the same. Where are tomatoes sold? They are sold in grocery stores, convenience marts. Absolutely. Any of the above. Cannabis would be able to be purchased in any of those places.
So how does that sound, people? You can go to your local grocery store and grab yourself a bundle of cannabis.
There you are.
That is pretty amazing.
So now, as far as any special taxes or anything else, no. It would be the same as any agricultural crop. It would be treated the same as any agricultural crop as far as where it could be planted, how it would be handled, as far as the way it would be grown or processed. All these things, it would be the same as any other food product. Now, would there be restrictions on it? Well, are there restrictions on our food, on the growth of our food? Yes, there is. We have to be careful about what chemicals we take and put in the ground. And for cannabis, all the more. Because cannabis is a bioeradicator. It draws heavy metals from the soil. So because of that fact, we can use cannabis to clean soil in toxic places. They're using it in Chernobyl to pull the radiation from the soil. They're using it in other different places around the world for that same purpose. So we have to be careful about what fields we plant it in. I mean, we have fields where we've been planting corn and wheat and other different products, and the soil is very toxic from all the pesticides and the fertilizers being used. So do we want to go in there and just start planting a whole bunch of cannabis in there? No, we don't. Not if we're going to be consuming them.
Someone's food or medicine. We definitely don't want it.
So we use good judgment. So what we do, we use good judgment. So we use our cannabis and we clean the soil, and we use that cannabis hemp, industrial hemp, for industrial products, for like building materials and things like that, until the soil is clean. And then we use it to produce food.
I've read the statutes, regulations from Colorado specifically, and it's quite difficult to get a license there, to cultivate, to enter into the market there. It's quite expensive as well. So how is this different?
Well, in a free and open market, it's much more available. What we are essentially talking about here is for the state of Missouri. Notice I'm saying one state. We are talking upwards of $1 trillion a year industry. And the reason being because when you legalize cannabis entirely, not regulated as it is in programs like we have currently here in Colorado, this is still another form of prohibition here. We still have heavy restrictions. So the growth of cannabis outdoors for medical purposes is basically illegal. The growth of hemp is highly restricted and continually monitored, because if you're growing outdoors, growing hemp, and it goes above 0.03% THC, basically the crops have to be destroyed.
That's ridiculous.
And so it's very, very close kind of scenario. So what I'm talking about is the same as any other crop. So you go in, you plant as many acres as you so choose. As you know, if you are, the only thing that separates you as a home grower, I mean, you can plant a garden, right? You can go and plant as much corn in your backyard as you so choose, or as much as your neighbors will tolerate you to plant. So it would basically be the same situation with cannabis. the biggest difference in all this is the fact that cannabis is far better for the soil. Cannabis requires far less in the realm of fertilizers and pesticides and all those sorts of things. So it's a far healthier choice. There would not be any restrictions. No restrictions on cannabis any different than restrictions on any other agricultural crop, as far as gardens in your backyard, as far as gardens in your home, as far as acreage that you plant, whether you want to choose to be a cannabis farmer or not. That would be pretty much determined upon your own bank account. Opening dispensaries, well, if you want to open a dispensary in Colorado to sell cannabis, you should have an upwards of $1 to $2 million in order to accomplish that task. Here, it would be, well, how hard is it to open a small grocery store? It would be about the same, or a convenience mart kind of a scenario, because it would be like any other food product. Best way to look at that is take any other food, take cabbage, tomatoes, whatever, and instead of say cannabis, say cabbage.
and again, to reiterate the point, you're viewing this as a food, as a non-toxic plant.
Yes.
So with the dispensaries and all the regulations, they're still, in their minds, that they're still treating this as if it's a toxic, dangerous plant. To be regulated, there needs to be a hedge put around it for the safety of whoever.
Now, whenever you're looking at the dispensary model, now understand the dispensary model didn't just happen. That came about by design. The true value of the dispensary is to channel great amounts of money through the hands of a few people, and that is, in fact, what it's doing. Now, the dispensary model is also, understand again, we're talking a Schedule I drug by the state's definition. Let's take another Schedule I drug, heroin. How would you handle it? How would you expect the government to handle it if a heroin shop was to open up down the street?
Yeah.
You would fully expect the brick walls. You would expect the armed security guards and the bars on the windows and the bars on the doors.
Right.
You'd expect it to be handled much the same as what we're currently seeing handled in Colorado.
And rightfully so. If that ever happens in this country, it is a dangerous substance. It has no value, in my opinion.
There you go. Now let's take another one. Now let's talk about K2 or spice. K2 and spice are synthetic cannabinoids. Now you can also thank NIDA, National Institute for Drug Abuse, for the proliferation of these very toxic substances that have been attributed to being the same as cannabis, which our science has proven here roughly about the last year and a half that all of the studies that NIDA has done on cannabis utilizing synthetic cannabinoids are no longer valid, because science has proven the fact that synthetic cannabinoids are nothing at all like the natural plant.
Right.
How about that?
Incredible.
Nothing NIDA has said for the last 15 years has any value.
Well, there is a lot of discussion, a lot of controversy around some of the points in this petition. You see some of the news floating around there. Other groups, local advocacy groups, have pointed out some of the, quote, flaws, end quote. And so let's talk about some of that. Let's talk about some of the controversy. The first one here I'd like to address is the issue of DUI. In Colorado and other states, they are fast-tracking these essentially marijuana breathalyzers, setting these regulations for people with certain amounts of cannabinoids in their system. Let's talk about what this means and why this is beneficial to the state of Missouri.
Well, when you were talking DUI or driving under the influence, cannabis does not fit the model that's been presented. This has been something I have fought for all along. I have fought this ever since cannabis advocacy groups started touting that they wanted to have cannabis treated the same as alcohol. I have fought this.
Yeah.
Because cannabis does not affect the human body the same as alcohol. Alcohol is a toxin. When we consume alcohol, basically it pours into our liver. Our liver holds it there because it recognizes it as a poison. Alcohol is a poison. And what it does is it holds that alcohol there in the liver until it can convert it to a non-toxic substance before it can release it. And then it tries to discharge it out of the body as quickly as possible. The human body does not see cannabis that way. When we consume cannabis, whether we smoke it or we eat it, whatever, basically when we consume it and it goes into our system, our body sees it as food, because that is in fact what it is. It is food. When we eat cannabis and it goes through our liver, it passes right through and is stored in our fat cells like any other food, because it sees it the same way. It sees it as endocannabinoids. It sees it as those components that our body uses, which are basically lipid messaging system. And it stores it away and utilizes. That's why people who consume cannabis can still test positive for it sometimes weeks later. It's because our body releases the phytocannabinoids just like it would the endocannabinoids when they're needed. Let me give you a good example. When a runner runs and he runs really hard, he gets what's called runner's high. Runner's high is actually our from a runner's high is very similar to the euphoria we experience from consuming cannabis. There's a really good reason, because we experience that euphoria because of the release of endocannabinoids into our bloodstream. Okay?
Interesting.
I had a brain cancer patient here a few weeks ago, was having some issues with her medicine when she was consuming she had brain cancer. She was consuming cannabis oil to treat it, but she was having issues. She said she went for a walk and she got very dysmorphic. She had a lot of euphoria, and she was having difficulty getting back home. Well, come to find out, after talking to her for a while, found out that she was feeling so good from the cannabis therapy, she was going on a 5-mile hike. And what she was doing was she was evoking that runner's high experience. She was actually evoking her endocannabinoid system to produce endocannabinoids right about the same time that the phytocannabinoids from the cannabis oil were being released into her blood. So she's just getting really, really high from both of those together because the experience is the same. So what I'm getting at is this is a natural response. The euphoria is a natural response.
So if somebody consumes cannabis, say, a half hour before they get to a motor vehicle, would there be any consequences if they were pulled over, say they ran a stop sign and police officers smelled marijuana and said, hey, have you been, like they would ask you, have you been drinking, have you been smoking? What would be the consequences for an individual like that under this initiative?
Under my initiative, the consequences would be based not upon the cannabis use. That's the point here. It's not enabling people to be able to drive stoned. It's taking away cannabis as a means of punishment. In other words, instead of looking at a person and profiling them and saying, that person looks like somebody who uses cannabis, or I overheard that person tell someone that they use cannabis, or they stuck their head in the car and said, I think I smell cannabis. Now, that's a lot different than seeing someone breaking the law. If he's swerving around on the road, he's speeding, if he's running a stop sign, if he's doing something where he's jeopardizing the safety of other people, then he is, in fact, breaking the law. But the use of cannabis in itself does not. The fact is that what science has actually proven is that people who regularly consume cannabis, in fact, are better drivers. The reason is because cannabis does not affect the human body the same way as alcohol does. Alcohol, being a toxin, it causes the brain to be numb. It actually causes the brain to swell. It causes the loss of brain cells. Cannabis is a neuroprotectant. Cannabis actually causes the generation of new neurons, which used to be considered a medical impossibility. Cannabis preserves and protects the brain. It has the opposite effect. As far as the experience of the euphoria, what it does is it makes us far more sensitive to everything around us. So what you end up seeing is with somebody who has just used cannabis and gets behind the wheel, which I don't recommend, and my bill does not in any way whatsoever encourage, but if a person were to do so, the biggest factor is that they would drive far slower. than someone who just gets behind the wheel. Or someone who gets behind the wheel after drinking alcohol, their senses are numb. They don't feel. When someone uses cannabis, they feel everything. It's a totally different kind of sensation. Now, the other factor is the more a person consumes cannabis, i.e. a patient, someone who has a chronic health condition and requires it, the more they use it, the less euphoria they experience. Very important factor. I've been a cannabis patient for over 18 years. I use cannabis on a regular basis. I do not get high. I am able to hold conversations with people now and relate to people and provide education.
Well, it's interesting. Statistics show that the use of cannabis is about 50-50 for white to black, African Americans, white Americans, and but on average, I think it's something like 4 to 1 African Americans are arrested as opposed to whites being arrested for cannabis possession, cannabis use, and oftentimes it's through a traffic stop. Yes. So I can see this having a tremendous impact on the criminal justice system here, and helping people avoid getting records, especially people among our youth who may be pulled over and have a joint or some type of paraphernalia in their vehicle, and getting a charge that sticks with them the rest of their life. It ruins their chances at a career education. So this to me is a very big issue.
We don't do that to someone who has prescription drugs. And the fact is that if someone has a morphine or any of these very toxic types of painkillers and other drugs, these do impede a person's ability to drive an automobile. Terrible. Now you mix that with alcohol, you compile a issue and make it 10 times worse. This really is the realm there. But again, it really should go back to, I don't care what it is, it really needs to go back to, is the person committing a crime? Profiling is not police work. It's bigotry. We need to take and reduce the police work back to what it should be, and that is watching and protecting people from harm, protecting people from those who are breaking the law, who are actually doing something that could harm themselves or someone else. Not looking for those who we can ticket or arrest to take and create profit. And this is where our police departments have been reduced to. Whenever they can take them and size up someone's pickup truck or car and say, wow, you know what, that could take and collect a nice amount of money in an auction if we were to claim it with asset forfeiture. And in fact, that happens a lot. Most people do not realize that their cars, their trucks, their bank accounts can be emptied, their homes can be taken through asset forfeiture and never even be charged with a crime. And this is the kinds of things that cannabis is used for, as an excuse, as a reason which to do these crimes, these legal crimes against the people. This is where we need to be returning this back to the people. The people need to be the ones in charge. The people are the ones who need to be in charge of what goes to bodies, what they have the right to consume into their own bodies. And whenever it's a substance that can heal them of very toxic, a very dangerous terminal illness, why on earth are we holding this back from our people? I have taken and made cannabis oil for a while now. I produce it on the side. It's not a part of the work I do with ECS. It's just something I do as a service. I got involved in making cannabis oil because I'm an educator and I wanted to be able to teach other people how to make it. So I started making it. Well, the moment I started making it, people started coming. The refugees, people finding out that I was making oil and they needed it desperately. And so I started providing it. And since that time, I have provided cannabis oil to children as young as the age of 1 year old. Why?
Yeah,
because there was no pharmaceutical in the world that could heal that child.
That's the next point of criticism that we've seen for some of these other groups here in Missouri, that this initiative has no age restriction.
Yes.
So tell us why that's a good thing.
Well, there is no age limit because I I cannot in good conscience put an age limit on food. Cannabis is food. There are a number of different kinds of food that can form different levels of euphoria, and yet they're still food, okay, because they're non-toxic. Cannabis is non-toxic. It does happen to cause euphoria among people who don't use it on a regular basis. Like I said, if you use cannabis on a regular basis, the euphoria goes away.
Is that the case with consuming raw cannabis, or is that only when you smoke cannabis?
Well, actually, when you consume raw cannabis, there is no euphoria at all. When you consume raw cannabis, there isn't, and the reason being is because what you have is there's only one active ingredient found in cannabis, and that's THC. The one cannabinoid called THC, and that one active ingredient, THC, most actively replicates an endocannabinoid called anandamide, and that's part of the reason why it affects the body, which it does, because it actually fits into our endocannabinoid receptors. Back to this. Okay. Your question again, sir. I'm sorry. I felt like I digressed.
Well, the question was about the controversy surrounding the no age restriction. Now, we know there's mass exodus of people moving up to Colorado, moving to other states, kids with epilepsy, other conditions. They're trying to get access to this medicine. Kids as old as 2, 3, 5 years old. So
yes.
Explain again why it's important that there be no age restriction for cannabis.
Well, okay, particularly when we're talking about medicine, absolutely. There should be no age restriction whatsoever to have access to cannabis as medicine, because of the fact that right now we are giving children as young as the age of 1 and actually younger, as much as 6 months and more, very highly toxic drugs. Some of the children that I've worked with were on very highly toxic drugs since the age of 6 months. And, with very little benefit from these drugs as far as relief from seizure and such. Some of the children I've worked with are having hundreds of seizures per day. And with the use of a very small pediatric dose of cannabis oil, now are between 95% and 100% seizure-free. What's more, tumor shrinking, being able to thrive, many other different very positive reactions to cannabis. The point here being is that we feel it necessary and feel it's right to give poison to children as young as 6 months, but cannabis, we feel that for some reason, and for only one reason, we can't give to our children. And my point I'm getting across here is the fact that science has proven it's non-toxic. So what is the issue? And there is only one, and that's euphoria.
It's interesting that, again, we pointed out the hypocrisy of our government and the FDA. The FDA has approved antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, all sorts of psychotropic drugs for children and adolescents. These are known with known toxins, myriad of negative side effects. So if that can be acceptable in society, why can't a non-toxic plant that has been proven to be effective for treating illnesses such as epilepsy have no that a medication has done what cannabis has done, and we've seen in recent days?
One of the things that was stated was, it said, well, under your bill, an 8-year-old girl could take and walk into a grocery store and walk out with a bag of cannabis. And I've made this point many times. So basically what I did was I went down to the local dollar store and started walking around with a camera. And I started photographing at an 8-year-old's height. Actually, most of my pictures I took were at about a 5-year-old's height. What I found were cold remedies, pain remedies, birth control. I found chlorine and bleach down bottles where a child could literally put the whole lid of the thing right into their mouth without even picking it up off of the shelf. Rat poison, mouse poison, and ant and roach poison. All within a child's height where a child could literally put them in their mouth, literally be poisoned without even leaving the store. After reading the labels throughout the store, cannabis, in fact, would probably have been the least toxic thing that an 8-year-old girl could take and walk out of that store with. You know, so really what this whole issue really comes down to is only one thing, and that's euphoria. And, you know, if we're talking euphoria, we're not talking getting drunk like on alcohol, because that is damage. That is poison. That is brain cells being killed at that point. That's not what a person has when they get high or they experience euphoria from cannabis. It doesn't harm the brain, and in fact, it's protecting the brain. So when the euphoria goes away, well, they feel good. They don't feel sick.
Hence the patent, the federal government's patent on the neuroprotective activities of cannabidiol, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, the patents that we have seen most recently regarding cannabis are coming down from a pharmaceutical company, GW Pharmaceuticals, who has actually come out with several patents just since that was in 2012. Now, since the first of the year, pharmaceutical companies have actually released, I believe, at least 4 or 5, have come out with at least 4 or 5 new patents on synthetics for THC and CBD. The hundreds, perhaps thousands of pages have been printed in research regarding cannabis. It is a hot-button subject when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry. They want cannabis, and they want it badly. So
well, it seems like
cannabis is not going away.
Yeah, absolutely not. It seems like to me the people in Missouri and the United States and people of the world have 2 choices. They can continue to allow governments and the big pharmaceutical industry to control their medicine, their health care. They can support initiatives like this that would legalize a non-toxic medicine that can be grown organically in your own home or in your own backyard and treat every type of illness that we've talked about and then some. How can people get involved? How can they support this? You mentioned at the beginning of this interview that there's petitions already being collected in the state of Missouri. How many are needed, and what are the chances of this actually going to vote?
Well, we are currently, I believe we're requiring somewhere in the neighborhood of about 165,000 signatures, I believe, statewide in that neighborhood. As far as valid signatures, that really means the collection of some neighborhood between 170 to 200,000 signatures to be sure that we have enough valid signatures that to get this put on the ballot. This requires signatures from across the whole state. I believe we currently, and I'm going to get this wrong, I'm sure. I believe we currently have 8 districts, I believe, in the state of Missouri. I believe. I may be wrong on that. I believe we have to have at least 7. And I'm sure Samara will be correcting me on that one. And that's okay. Please correct me. But basically what it amounts to is that we need those signatures, and we need them from all across the country. We can't have them just from one across the state, not just one part. We need a good showing, particularly in the St. Louis and the areas east, as well as the major cities across the rest of the state, like Kansas City and Springfield and Jeff City, and all across. A strong support. This has been a truly grassroots campaign in every way. There has not been any great contributors financially to this. In fact, we have had basically very little. I believe that in statewide, and I think that they may be roughly about $1,200, $1,200 to $1,500 statewide that has actually been collected to the bank accounts that have been, all that's being handled right now, and the reporting all that information. But the remarkable thing about that is that we have petitioners across the state who realize that there wasn't money behind this. They went out and they paid for the printing of the petitions. They paid for their own gasoline to take and travel around and do this. They've taken their own time out from their work and from everything to petition to try to get this put on the ballot. That's how important this issue is to Missourians. I've known for years that we had a majority in Missouri, a majority that wanted to see cannabis truly legal. Our issue is that we haven't had the opportunity to ask for it. And that's why with this initiative, my hope was not to have to make another compromise, not to have to give away one person's ability to have access just so I could have it. where we could all say, this is what we really wanted all along, and we're going to go for that. So everyone can have access, so everyone can have the healing that they so much need. In most of the ballots across this country, understand, in 20-some-odd states that have some kind of a medical cannabis program, not one has ever led with education. Not even once. Not even one time have we given the citizens of this great country the opportunity to know about cannabis and what it could really represent to them as a people, both as medicine, but also as an industrial product that could be saving our trees, producing building supplies, plastics, solvents, you name it, all these many vast number of different products, biodegradable products, and be able to clean our soil, clean our air. This is monumental for us. We need this desperately as a nation.
I would think with all of the discussion about global warming and climate change that would be all over this.
Absolutely. And the rest of the world is waking up to the fact that cannabis can be all these things for us. They were once. They can be again. There was a time that this country, actually, when we were colonies, we produced the very best in hemp. And again, that's from everything from textiles to building supplies, you name it. And again, this is all not even mentioning the values that cannabis represents in the form of medicine. So, I mean, averting our nation back to one of nutrition rather than using poison to treat illness. Hippocrates said many years ago, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. There was no more important words ever spoken.
Well, Mark, I really appreciate you taking this call, doing this interview. I think it's going to be very helpful for Missourians to understand what this is all about, and we're hopeful for a future where people can really truly live free in this nation once again. And is there anything else you would like to add?
Absolutely. For more information on this issue, you can go to the Cannabis Restoration Protection Act.org, where you can get different information on where you can go to sign petitions, where you can sign up to become a petitioner. You can also contact us at, you can go to our website at myecstherapy.org and check into the work that we're doing. Also check out my interviews on YouTube. You can find those at cannabispatientnetwork.org, and that will take you right to my YouTube channel.